Welcome. We're going to have a session with Jürgen Albert from Data in Motion, who's going to talk about the Eclipse Modeling Framework and conjunction with Bndtools and the wonderful generate function. So Jürgen, can you tell a little bit about yourself?
Yeah. Hello, Peter. Thanks for having me first. Yeah, my name is Jürgen Albert. I'm the CEO of Data in Motion. I'm also the current chair of the OCI Working Group Steering Committee. And yeah, naturally, I'm an OCI and BND enthusiast for quite some time now. And yeah, through all our projects, we had one other common denominator, which was EMF. We are using quite heavily on all ends of the spectrum, from persistence to on the REST endpoints, and on general modeling for general modeling purposes. And yeah, this brought us to providing a good implementation and integration in Bndtools, as this is our daily bread and butter tool we are using. And yeah, this is how we ended up here.
Great. So let's get started. Let's see. The proof of the pudding is in the eating. So let's start eating.
And what we want to do is create a little model for, in our case, an address book, and then put some servers and commands around it to work with the whole thing. So in order to achieve this, we should get started by creating a BND workspace. The whole thing, I will just use the default BND workspace, which comes when you when you install Bndtools as a starting point. And we get our neat little CNF file. And in order to get started, we naturally will need some dependencies which are required for EMF and especially the code generator. In order to do this, I will just copy in our magic BND library. It's currently in a snapshot version because I just reworked a couple of things and we are working out the last kinks, but it already works quite well. So after we saved here, should see, yes, our BND library. Besides the temp code generator, the BND libraries is also a new thing we introduced with 6.2, I believe. Which is some kind of pluggable way to add functionality to BND. Thanks to you, Peter, in this case.
Just one question. This one comes from the Sonatype. Yeah, I see.
Yeah, this comes from the Sonatype snapshot. So
yes.
Because we release our stuff to Maven Central, all the open source things, and the snapshot comes from Sonatype. So that's why it neatly works with the Maven Central, which is somewhere in here, which only has the release URL. That's funny. It works for me because I have it locally in my Maven repository. So, okay, but if it is available on Sonatype, I will add this later. But okay, so it works because it works.
I shouldn't ask questions.
That's good that you ask, because I didn't realize that we don't. But usually it is also available on Sonatype in this case. So yeah, but besides that, what we can now do is we have this neat little instruction called library. Which is currently missing a little bit of tooling support, meaning we don't have an auto-completion after that. So we need to know how libraries are named. And in my case, I luckily know how it is named. It's called aQute EMF. And when we hit save, and hopefully after reloading the whole thing, we will see that now we have a new repository down here, which contains all the necessary dependencies to work with aQute EMF. So, and with all the bundles that come along here, we bring along another bundle which is helpful in BND, which is a BND template. So when I click here, I have a couple of my other templates that are flying around, and this aQute EMF model template is what comes along with these dependencies in here.
So the template comes from the library adds a repository, and the templates are in that repository.
Exactly. That's
Nice.
the idea behind it. So we start with a Gecko EMF model project and give it a fancy name like org.test.emf.model, for example. And when we hit next, it asks us for a few more things. I can briefly, I will not go too deep into EMF. Whoever looks at this hopefully knows a little bit about it. But we always need a file that defines our model we are working at. That is the so-called ecore file, so we can give the whole thing a name. So we call it address book because I want to do an address book example. The package should also be named address book. With all our classes will end up in some kind of a URI to identify our model. We leave it as it is in here. Give it also a prefix. It is then using for serialization in some parts, and also the so-called gen model prefix, which is when some classes like factories are created, they get a prefix in front of it that it's not only called factory. So then it will be called like address book factory, for example. So we hit finish. No, I don't want this in here. So, and when we now look at our project, we first see two things in here. Or first look at the structure in source. At the moment, all the generated code will be placed. We can also put it. Some people prefer having it in source gen or something like this. I don't really care where to put it, as this bundle always, also in our case, only contains the generated code and nothing else. So it can also be in the source part. We have the model folder, which contains our actual data model we want to look at later. And the gen model describes how the code in the ecore should be generated in the end. We see another library in here, which is also one that comes with our dependencies in here. This is enable EMF. So enable EMF does a couple of things, or maybe actually just a few things. It only extends your BD bundle path, your build path, to give you the usual suspects you need to develop the whole thing. So when you work with EMF, you always need common, XMI, and ecore as bundles, because they have a couple of indirect dependencies to this. We also use annotations for the things from the framework. This is what this neat little library does. We'll look again in our cache. We will see that there now is another one. Yeah, it's the project library, which also contains project BD. Everybody can look at if he likes. So which just
okay, that's nice.
Extends the build path.
So the library in the build.bnd provides you with the proper setup, and the library instruction in the project is actually using it in the project, is making it active in the project.
Exactly. So, but back to our actual code generator. The generate instruction tells BND what objects or what file to watch at. So in this case, it's our gen model, because this defines how the code generation should be done. We tell it that we want to use a generator called Gecko EMF in this case. And I wasn't able to really get this information inside the generator, so we currently have to repeat it here. And we set our output to source. So, and the other thing, because BD, or not BD, because EMF wants it that way, we also need to include the models we have in our bundle in the end, so that they are available later on for other reasons. So, and let's dig into what we actually have here. EMF, yeah, is a modeling tool. So, and it comes with a couple of ways to edit and model and modify your model. There are graphical editors you are used to from the similar to the common UML editors you have for entity relation models. The default way is like this. It's structured. You have your file, then the package, which will become your Java package in the end, and in there your entities. So in this, it starts up with this example entity, and which has nothing in it, and I can say, okay, maybe give it an attribute, and the attribute has a name, like it has an ID. It has a type. It's always called e-type in EMF. We say, okay, the type is a string. It's also an e-string always for this native types. And hey, we also can define this is an ID attribute. So if somebody later looks at it and wants to persist this object, it can always find out, okay, what's the defining ID for the thing. So we have this in here. And maybe just another attribute, which is like this description, which is also a string. And descriptions, we may have more. So we do say this is descriptions and say the upper bound is -1. So, and we can always say, okay, but there should be at least one description. So the lower bound is 1. So this becomes a mandatory field, and we can later check on it that everything is valid before we persist it or send it over the wire or something like that.
Just for my understanding, example is address book. That is the address book entity we're describing currently.
Exactly. So there's already some generated code. So here we see our example class. So which is comes from the example I've just put in here. If we look at the example, so this has now it's just empty as we have started. The reason for this is we only edited the eCore file, but not the generator model for it, because this is what it's actually watching. And in EMF, when you click on it, the editor has some magic in it, which then analyzes your eCore file, does the necessary calculations, and you see immediately the editor becomes dirty because he gets entries to all of the example and all the entities in there, because you can modify a lot of things about this in the generator phase in here, but I will not go into detail what you can enter here. But the moment I save my generator model, we will hopefully see that here suddenly we have things in there magically appearing to the whole chagrin. And yeah, it's basically the magic behind the code generator. You added something somewhere else, and hey,
yeah,
and suddenly magic.
It's now even in the jar file already, I guess.
Yeah, even the jar file. So it's automatic. We generate the package info for doing the exports. Unfortunately, for EMF, we also have to export the impl if you do inheritance. But when we look in our resulting jar file, we'll see here we have our data, our classes, the proper imports, some capabilities we provide, and everything.
Nice.
Just as a side note, usually, like I said, EMF needs, what EMF does in the end, it also creates a so-called package, this package for you, and the package gives you access to your actual classes, in this case called e-classes. So this gives you reflective access. You can say, okay, I have an e-class here. What are your attributes? You can go over the attributes, can say, hey, what attribute, what are you? Are you a string? Are you an ID? What's your name? And so on and so forth. We can work with this for serialization, transformation, and things like that. So, and it has a really good and much more convenient API than if you would work with Java reflections. So it makes it easy to like copy objects without knowing what you have in your hand. And usually in EMF, they generate this plugin XML for the extension point, and in there it says, okay, please instantiate for me an e-package and register this e-package in my internal package registry. So if somebody comes around and says, I have a class in the name with the URI or somewhere under the URI we have defined in here, then he looks in his registry and finds this package and then can work with the whole thing. So it needs to be announced there so it knows about it. And we, in our case, have thrown out all these things and just declared our package a component, or in this case, a service, which is registered under e-package in general, which is the base class, and its actual package, and does all the activation thing, all the things that are required in the activation phase. register a few convenience things around it, and things can now come and go at runtime. So you can work with your models, and the moment you edit this, the eCore, things get regenerated, get updated in your running system, and yeah, it's very, very neat and nice, and things you can't really actually do with the original way.
You really leverage the OCI model this way. Nice.
Yes, because it works really nice together.
Now, let me show how you can use it.
Yeah, that's the other part. So I've prepared something in advance because nobody needs to look at us writing code. So let me quickly copy. I hope I named everything correctly. And on Syncing Workspace, we see, hooray, we have our new project. So I've created two things. What is red at the moment for obvious reasons. We have one bundle that provides an address book manager implementation, and I've just put it in one bundle in this case for the ease of the whole thing. It has an address book manager. It has something like add persons, add contacts. We want to see what we have there so it can print the whole thing out and even load or save the thing to a file. So for later use and reuse and change for the whole thing. So in here, it naturally, as we don't have an address book yet, it's not working, but I have prepared something for us. Close the other things here. So, and if I overwrite our address book, we will have a look at it in a minute. Yes. So now we look at this address book. So now we have the core thing, which is our basic address book. Naturally, an address book has a list of persons in there. These persons have a name, everybody has an ID, and the person can has an indefinite list of contacts. So, and contacts have a type and a value, and currently we have to type unknown, mobile, or email. So for the whole thing, to just have a little bit of things we can do with the whole thing. Again, if we look in here, so we have see our old stuff after I opened the gain model. Yes, I didn't make any errors in here. Zack, we see we now have our new classes in there, and also our address book manager immediately is ready and is stated that it is a component. So what are we doing in here? In order to work with the data, we always need the factory for our classes, because EMF is not, it does not support, also you can trim the generator model to allow it, but the default way is that you have a factory to create for creating your entities. So this is called, this our case, the address book factory. We conveniently already register for you as a service. And we also, and then we can say with this, okay, please create us our address book. So we usually have one address book, which is saved as an instance here. And so the instance, it gets an ID, and we just give it some random default description to the whole thing.
You're brave to not use an annotation on it. It is okay, but
I forgot it actually.
Yeah, but it's called activate. So I think
yeah, I know. Good advice. I usually do it all the time. In this case, I've overlooked this part in the heat of the battle, but yeah, SCR luckily looks by itself for activate methods.
Yeah.
In a magic manner. Yeah. And additionally, because we want to have all the things ready available before somebody uses it, so we call the immediate thing. So that's the activation phase. Yeah, we naturally can add a person to the whole thing with some default contact. So we create via the factory a person, set the normal things, add it to our instance. So with this, again, I just totally call add contact with my created person ID, which creates a contact. Yeah, so we add the contact, and we always return the appropriate IDs of what we have contacted, what we have created. Before we go to the next part, maybe just do something, I've also have this other bundle.
One second, you didn't show it, but the service project that you just had, it depends. Can you show the BND file?
Yes. It has basically, again, we enable EMF because we will do the default dependencies, and then it just depends on our model.
On your model, exactly. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So, and for the annotations on the correct version. So, and then if we look at our command thing, where we have some Google commands in here, yeah, just as these few annotations and dependency on our address example service. And yeah, in here.
And there you're just in a normal OCI world, you don't need the EMF stuff anymore.
Exactly. So because we have everything encapsulated there, so we have our methods, it's just delegating there. BD run in here, which only contains, only has our command as a dependency. One thing. I hate, as by the default in the BND workspace framework is Equinox. And I never get the console running in Equinox on the first try because I never remember.
You have to, yeah, that's always a bit awkward.
Yeah, so I usually use Felix, so we have to add Felix here. And hopefully now it has everything, yes. So
this is always so nice, isn't it?
Yes, I love it. So this is what we have in order to use the whole thing. Yeah. Felix configure the config admin. Not sure why the config admin comes in here. What is it? Update, and we say run. So one of the reasons why it still is in snapshot, because for example, I seem to have some debug printouts here.
Yeah.
Is one thing I need to.
It's okay. It's always cool to have the latest stuff.
Yeah. So if we look at help, we see our address examples in here. So we might want to start by saying add person, Peter, and your phone number for all the world to see is 1234. And hopefully this works. Okay, we obviously seem to have created a person called Peter with the ID here. And maybe I also give you your email address. Add contact to Peter. It was email, I believe, the type, and the value will be like you did this. So here we are. So now, yeah, that's nice and interesting that we have our contacts in here, but then we want a way to see what is in our address book, and I built it the nerd way, which is print. And we see, oh, this is how the thing would look like in XMI. This is the default storage format of EMF, which is actually quite neat. Every object in EMF is or should be or might be attached to a so-called resource, and the resource is a file, somewhere an HTTP endpoint or something like this. This is always defined as a resource, and all resources need to know of each other. So you have a so-called resource set around it, which is basically your cache or persistence manager for the whole thing. In our case, I say, okay, for all the, I have this resource sets, also something we provide can be simply injected. In our case, I do it as a component service object, so we can get fresh instances and clean them up after we are finished with the whole thing, because if not, the garbage collector will have a hard time cleaning all this mess up. So I say, give me a new resource set. And now, okay, please resource set, create a resource for me, and I give it a URI. So in this case, I just call it like address book XMI, just as an example, because it's only for printout. And then we, whatever our resource, we can save things to. And in our case, as EMF is using strong references, which means it really takes care if somebody says, this is mine, and you take it and put it to somebody else who says, okay, I'm the only one who can hold of this, then it takes it from the other guy. So, and removes it from that list. So this is something you need to know, and if you define it that way. So the same thing it does with resources. An object can only be attached to one resource. So the simplest method is to call a copy on the whole thing, which is using the reflective mechanism to provide you with a deep copy of your object. Which is quite convenient in many cases. So we attach this to our resource here. And as we only want to have a printout, I just say, okay, resource, save, and give it a sysout.
System out, so it's out, yeah.
Yeah, you can give it an input or out, in this case, input stream, yes. Or if you use it without input stream, then it would save it to the address book XML file in this case. Or if it's the .xml, it would be an XML file, or whatever is defined behind it. Or JSON, if you have JSON support, then you would do like this. So this
right, that's what you do in the save method.
And this is what we this is what we do in the save method. With save, we can give it a file. So if we look at here, I can say save to address book. I already have one there, so I call it address book 2.xmi. And we will now see that in here, we now have our second XMI. And we have exactly what we have in here. And we also have the ability to load something, as I said, which is the same thing in reverse.
In reverse, yeah.
We just give it a name with URI and say resource load. And then we have a list of contents, so there can be multiple objects in one file in theory. So just give us remove the first one, which we know is an address book, and so we cast it and set it as our current instance. So when we now would say load address book, was it with a number or what? Address 1.xmi, and say print, we'll see that suddenly in here there is a guy called Max with completely different things in here. So, and I could add things again, save them again, load them again.
Now this is pretty cool. It works like a charm with everything being dynamic. Because let's not go into all the details, but I guess if you make a change to the model, then you would automatically update everything. If you would, for example, add a new field to or a new type to the enum.
Yep, this would work out of the box, hopefully. Let's give it a shot. New enum literal. This is number 3. And we call it
just call it home.
Home, yeah. Good. If we give the name, we automatically set the literal. I have to admit, I never really understood what the literal should be used for, but we could ask at Merckx. That's now the only thing. I'm not sure if he realizes. Oh no, he realized that there's a change. There are some changes the GAIN model does not really need to know about, and so it does not reflect that something like this happens. So in this case, you just need to delete your files, and then it will automatically regenerate. But we now should see here, we have home. So let's try it out. Add contact to Max for home and give it this one. No value present.
Okay, shouldn't have asked this, but something should go wrong in the presentation.
Yeah, definitely. So when we do something, we don't have a blue screen.
You probably have do a print of the address book, because the print is of the you have restarted everything. So you have an empty.
Yeah, that's the thing. Yeah, sorry. Yes.
So you should load it again, and then you should be able to do it.
Yeah. Good point.
And now you should still be able to do that. Yeah. It works. Yeah, nice.
Good that I have you here for debugging. So suddenly everything's there.
Yeah, no, it's no. The thing is, there is so much happening in the background that you don't see. But basically, everything when you make a change, it updates everything, including the running framework. So it's cool. I think we already spent quite a bit of time on this, more than we originally intended. So I think we should try to close it down.
Definitely.
I'm impressed. It looks like it worked quite smooth, and you really leverage the OSDI and Bndtools stuff, of course, in building this. Impressed. Anything to add?
Thanks for making this possible. Without the code generators, it wouldn't be doable. So yeah, thanks heaps.
Okay, thanks, and well, we'll talk again.
Yeah. Hope
Bye.
So. Bye.